And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on Thursday, August 21st, 2025. And for the aviation flying weather here to start out Friday morning, we have a few features to speak of. There's an area of low pressure in the North Pacific with a trough that's going to rotate up in and along the outer coast areas of the Panhandle, bringing some showers with that. And then we have a low pressure coming up through the western Bering that'll cross the Gulf of Anadyr and into the Bering Strait Friday night into pre-dawn of Saturday morning. Some cooler air up along the Arctic coast, North Slope, and we expect some IFR conditions there. There'll be quite a surge of moisture, mainly rain, coming in along the west coast, Bering Strait, and that'll spread up into the Brooks Range. Some of the higher elevation areas could see a wet snow, but you not only have the rain, you also have a push of milder temperatures coming in off the Bering and breezy conditions. So kind of several things going on. Meanwhile, Panhandle, weak area of high pressure over British Columbia, Western Canada will have a tendency to kind of break down as that trough rotates back to the north and west. So we do expect IFR conditions areas of the Brooks Range here Friday morning, also along the west coast, Norton Sound, YK Deltas, and also out over the lower Gulf back through Kamishak Bay, Kodiak Island, then extending out along the Aleutian chain. For Friday afternoon, IFR conditions are expected all along the Arctic coast, Beaufort Sea coastline down along the Chukchi Sea coast through at least Point Hope and maybe Kivalina. Also through the Bering Strait, IFR conditions, and those will extend from Nome down along the lower Yukon coast. And then we have IFR conditions offshore of the Panhandle up into the southeastern, south central Gulf, and then widespread IFR conditions along the Aleutian chain for Saturday morning. Still that low sitting down here in the North Pacific, so with the circulation and some showers around that lower clouds, we do have IFR conditions mainly just off the coast there, off of Sitka and Prince of Wales Island. And then we have IFR conditions along the south slopes here, the Brooks Range, areas of the northwest coast from just east of Utqiagvik down through Point Hope, and then the Bering Strait all along from Nome through the lower Yukon and into Kuskokwim Bay, and then out along the Aleutians. And for Saturday afternoon, as more moisture just comes onshore inland with that system passing up through the Bering Strait, it's going to be a breezy one with mainly rain, IFR conditions though along the Arctic coast, extending into the North Slope, Kotzebue Sound, Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew, Nunavik Island, just offshore there of Bristol Bay, and all along the lower Bering and Aleutian chain. Generally, VFR conditions there Saturday afternoon be a warm one in areas of south central where you do see sunshine. A number of spots will get above 70 degrees, and then out here too through the Panhandle, generally VFR conditions are expected Saturday afternoon. So pass conditions on Friday, Anaktuvik Pass will start out IFR in the morning, giving way to MVFR. Same thing, Adigan Pass up there in the east central Brooks Range, IFR in the morning, giving way to MVFR, and then Lake Clark and Merrill, we're looking at MVFR conditions becoming VFR. And as we round up there through the Alaska Range, Rainy Pass as well as Windy Pass, we'll see MVFR conditions become VFR by midday. And Isabel Pass, also MVFR conditions Friday morning, giving way to VFR. And Mentasta Pass should generally hold on to VFR conditions, so there may be some MVFR conditions along and south of the south entrance in the northern Copper River Valley. Tanita Pass, MVFR conditions early Friday, giving way to VFR. Same thing, Portage, MVFR in the morning, and VFR for midday afternoon. And then Chilkoot and White should generally have VFR conditions expected Friday. Now looking at the freezing levels at the surface, we do have some temperatures near freezing, but up there, the Beaufort Sea and back up just to the east-southeast of Wrangel Island as you get up the Chukchi Sea, Arctic Ocean. And freezing levels aloft come up quite a bit. We have that low that's going to be crossing out here through the western Bering. And within the warm sector, we find freezing levels aloft 12 and 14,000 feet, covering much of the central southern Bering, all the way down through the Aleutian chain. And also some higher freezing levels above 10,000 feet, lower Panhandle out toward British Columbia between Haida Gwaii and Vancouver Island. So where there is some precipitation. I mentioned there's some showers going to kind of rotate back to the north and west with a trough for Friday here along mainly the outer part of the Panhandle coastline. But above 12,000 feet, there could be some pockets of moderate icing there. And then back to the west with the flow of moisture coming in from southwest to northeast. It's a pretty strong one. You have this push of much milder air and breezy conditions. So with that ample moisture, that means thicker clouds, mainly rain. So above 8,000 feet freezing level, there could be icing, considerable icing up there along the Brooks Range, around Kotzebue Sound, above 10,000 feet, Seward Peninsula. And then as we get out toward the lower Yukon coast and back to just west-northwest of St. Matthew, we could find some moderate icing above 14,000 feet. And you can see the ridging clearly where that warmer air is in the here at jet stream level, 30,000 feet, 300 millibars. There is a jet core of 135 knots coming up into the western Bering, and then a broad area of 100-plus knot winds across the Chukchi Sea into the northwest mainland, and that dives southeastward before turning northeasterly across Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula, and areas out ahead of the Panhandle there through the lower Gulf, North Pacific, southwest flow, 65 knots. And then 9,000 feet or 700 millibars. A couple of notable wind fields, the strongest one being here out over the Bering Sea, associated with that low pressure that's going to be riding along the Kamchatka Peninsula into the Gulf of Anadyr Friday night. So some stronger winds there at 9,000 feet or 700 millibars. It's a broader belt of winds, 35 to as high as 50 knots there as you get northeast of Dead Horse and Kaktovik along the Arctic coast. And then we have the low circulation, lower Gulf, North Pacific with some winds either side of that, about 35 knots. And then finally at 3,000 feet, of note, there are maybe some localized winds around 30 knots or so up off the coastline there of Sitka. But back to the west, this is where we have the main action. Here the low pressure circulation along the Kamchatka Peninsula. And as we head on over to and south of St. Matthew, winds at 3,000 feet, southwesterly to 50 knots. And then we have a broader area, 50 to even 60 knot westerly winds out over the central and western portion of the Bering Sea, with winds continuing in the 35 to 45 knot range along and north, especially of the western half of the Aleutian chain. So the turbulence for Friday will be out there over the Bering from around St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew. Could be moderate turbulence, surface to 3,000 feet, some isolated moderate turbulence coming up into the Pribilovs, and maybe Nunavik Island by Friday afternoon, and then another area of moderate turbulence across the central and western Aleutians on Friday, surface to 3,000 feet.